Okay, so we've gotten through a few uh, relatively obvious bugs in thinking. Inappropriate appeals to authority, fallacy of composition versus division, appeal to ignorance is absence of evidence, evidence of absence, and red herring, non sequiturs. Those are a few to remember, but at least when we see them, at least when they're pointed out to us, they're relatively obvious. They're easily overlooked in real conversation because real conversation moves really quickly, and you're also trying to listen, you're trying to figure out what you should say. It moves quickly, and your brain has to do a lot of other things. So paying attention to good reasoning in a real live conversation, as opposed to just editing a paper, is hard. Which is one reason why we're so error prone. And real life is like that small business where the entire accounting department is 8-year-olds only armed with pencils and paper. But now we'll get into some slightly more subtle bugs. Not because we intend to go into debugging forever, but the debugging's gonna lead us somewhere to how to build rhetoric. So, a few not technically fallacies. Really, what we're looking at here is ambiguity. Different kinds of ambiguity. What's ambiguity again? It's related to vagueness. Vagueness is easier, where we don't know where the line between something is. Bald versus not bald. I don't know, like, I'm sort of like half bald. Am I bald? Am I not bald? We're not sure where the cut point is. That's vagueness. Ambiguity is where it's not a borderline issue, but rather there's two or more different possible interpretations. Sometimes ambiguity can be good, but it can be tricky. It opens the door for trickiness, because sometimes someone can switch between one meaning and another without telling you that they're switching. When that happens, when a term's ambiguous and someone switches meanings without any indication, we call that equivocation. Another big word. Let's try an example of equivocation. They're sort of like, they're almost like tongue twisters or riddles usually. Half a loaf of bread is better than nothing. Nothing is better than good health. Therefore, simple substitution syllogism, half a loaf of bread is better than good health. Wait a minute. I don't like that conclusion. I don't think that half a loaf of bread is better than good health is true. Untrue conclusion. But A is greater than B is greater than C, therefore A is greater than C. The logic looks right. Untrue conclusion. What happened? What happened was that, okay, you see that nothing, the word nothing, shows up in each of the two premises. Half a loaf of bread is better than nothing. Nothing is better than good health. The definition of nothing changes. Half a loaf of bread is better than 0 loaves of bread, which is one kind of nothing. Good health is very important, and therefore there is not any specific thing that is more important than good health. And that empty set no specific thing falls into that category of things that are more important than good health, that empty set also fits the label nothing. But 0 loaves of bread and an empty set, they're not exactly the same thing. So, really, A is greater than B1, B2 is greater than C. But B1 and B2 are not the same. Different definitions of nothing. And so we can't make that syllogism. We can't do the substitution and get to A is greater than C. And if we do that, then we get a crazy conclusion. Half a loaf of bread is better than good health. Applying normal, basic, correct syllogism gets us crazy conclusions when the definition of a word changes. When ambiguity is used surreptitiously. That's called equivocation. It's a dirty, underhanded trick, and it sometimes happens accidentally, and so we have to always be on the lookout for it, even when you trust the other person, because it sometimes does happen accidentally. Here's one more example. Happiness is the end of life. The end of life is death. Therefore, happiness is death. Same syllogistic structure. A is B, B is C. Substitution, therefore, A is C. The problem is ambiguity and a switch in the meaning of the end. Happiness is the goal of life. The termination of life is death. Happiness is the goal of life. Happiness is the end of life. The termination of life is death. The end of life is death. In one instance, the end is a goal. In the other instance, the end is termination. When you don't notice that switch in the meaning, you get to crazy you apply syllogism validly, but get to crazy conclusions like happiness is death. We don't want to end up at crazy conclusions, so you gotta watch out for equivocation. And equivocation is basically a devious or sloppy use of ambiguity. And since we're on the topic of ambiguity, let's go through all of them and remind ourselves about amphiboly. It's a subtype of ambiguity, but it's easily overlooked. So far with our treatment of ambiguity, we've been dealing with ambiguous lexemes, ambiguous terms, words or a set of words. There's a thing in the sentence you can point to that might have two definitions. We can identify the thing in the sentence that's the problem. Amphiboly is ambiguity, but it's hard to circle the problem. Well, I guess you can if you're gonna do syntax trees, but that would be like a whole nother course. Maybe we can do a course on generative syntax next semester, but that's a whole nother course. So amphiboly is grammatical ambiguity. We'll go through a set of examples because we don't want to start drawing syntax trees. We'll be here for a while if we do that. So here's a classic example of amphiboly. The oracle told the king that if he started a war, there would be a great victory. Okay. Should the king be more confident in starting that war? Well, no. Presumably the king already knows that wars tend to have a winner and a loser. Yes, there's going to be a great victory for someone. The oracle never said whether it's a great victory for the guy who's asking or for the enemy. The oracle never specified. The oracle just said someone's gonna win. Which, hopefully the king already knew that someone is going to win. Otherwise that kingdom has some problems. At least it doesn't work this way in all languages. Languages that have noun case probably don't have so many dangling modifiers. But modern English, except for pronouns, which is why they're hard, got rid of noun case. So we have a lot of phrase modifiers that are whole phrases, usually prepositional phrases. And you can put them in a lot of places. Sometimes their placement makes for ambiguous parsing that you're not exactly sure which noun the modifier modifies. This is called a dangling modifier. Like, hopefully we will go to the beach. Does that modify the whole sentence that I hope that we will go to the beach? Or we definitely will go to the beach, and we will go in a hopeful manner? That's a sentence final or sentence initial or sentence final dangling modifier in English. Here's another example. This morning, Bob saw a flying saucer in his night clothes. Okay. Therefore, flying saucers sometimes wear clothes. Flying saucer in his night clothes. In his night clothes, it's just sort of there at the end of the sentence. We don't really know which noun it modifies. Is Bob in his night clothes, or is a flying saucer in the night clothes? Context and practicality will answer that question for us. It's probably Bob who has pajamas and not the flying saucer. I don't know, well, could be the flying saucer, but it's probably Bob. If the flying saucer has pajamas, presumably the storyteller should mention that detail. It's a rather interesting detail. Okay, that example sounds pretty stupid. We can easily figure out who has the pajamas. But now we're going to replace some nouns, and it's going to get a little less and less clear. I saw the bird with binoculars. Well, chances are I have the binoculars. Theoretically, I could be seeing with the naked eye a bird that stole someone's binoculars and now is walking around with binoculars. Of course, if that was the case, hopefully we'd get some details about this kleptomaniac bird that has binoculars. We don't know, though. You never know what kind of important details someone will leave out of a story. Okay, that example was stupid too. Let's replace one word. Instead of bird, student. I saw the student with binoculars. Did I use binoculars to see a student far away? Was I close to the two people and there were several students and one of them had binoculars around his neck? Was I far away and using binoculars to look at someone else who had binoculars? Could be any of those. We don't know. That is amphiboly. We know what I am. We know what the student is. We know what binoculars are. We know what the verb saw, or to see, means. None of the terms are ambiguous. They're not even vague. But the grammatical connections between them are ambiguous. When ambiguity is in grammar, but instead of in the words themselves, or the lexemes, that's amphiboly. And now, just to make things crazy, can we have ambiguity and amphiboly in the same sentence? I saw the star with a telescope. Well, chances are the astronomer has the telescope. It's not that he's looking out into space and he sees a telescope orbiting Alpha Centauri out there. Probably. So context resolves that matter of amphiboly. Grammatically, it could be Alpha Centauri out there with a telescope orbiting it. But what's the star? Is the star a celestial body out there? Or is it a celebrity? Maybe I'm a paparazzo and I love to spy on celebrities. And the celebrity I'm spying on is a stargazer using a telescope. Maybe the star does have the telescope, if the star is a human celebrity. Could even be the paparazzo is using a telescope to look at the celebrity who is using a telescope to look at Alpha Centauri that has a telescope orbiting it. That would be a sentence that has lexical and grammatical ambiguity. It's ambiguous and it's amphibulous. And that was only 7 words long. Language can be a monster if you don't keep paying close attention to it. The last so far we've basically been throwing around definitions, switching them surreptitiously, or changing grammar. You can also play around with emphasis. Fasten your seatbelt. Okay? Fasten your seatbelt. No. Fasten your seatbelt. Fasten your seatbelt. Those don't sound functionally equivalent. In each of those, the emphasis is on a different word. Fasten your seatbelt. Don't whip it around your head or something. I don't know. I'm not sure what else you can do with a seatbelt. Oh, you could probably hit the person in the other seat with it. Yeah, don't whip your sibling with the seatbelt. Rather, fasten your seatbelt. Fasten your seatbelt. No, don't fasten the person next to you. Mind your own business. Fasten yours. Fasten your seatbelt? I don't know, maybe you're fastening some fastener on your backpack. Come on, pay attention. We're trying to take off on the plane. Get your seatbelt in order. Your backpack will be fine. And so the pragmatic, real-world intent of those sentences could all be different, even though they involve the same words. The sentence involves the same words, but in each of those where the emphasis is shifted, the operant word is a different word, and the practical implication of what the speaker wants to happen is different in each of those 3 versions of the same words sentence. That throwing around emphasis to have different implied goals of a sentence, that is called accent. And you know, these last ones, equivocation, amphiboly, and accent, I really don't consider them to be fallacies. So if they're at the end of the fallacy chapter, maybe we're transitioning to something else.